Carol. First thing and watched her stand.
It was you.
It was me?
You were chair.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying.
Oh, no, you were chair.
No.
That's still 5 seconds ago. I'm past that.
Do I have to
Keep
hold
up.
the lab again? Okay. Okay. Alrighty, it's 6:30, so I'm going to bring the meeting of the Lincoln County School District 2025-26 Budget Committee to order. And we'll start with introductions. And Mary, why don't we start with you? We'll just go around.
I'm Mary Wood, Zone 5. I'm Cindy School Board on South County.
Jason Malloy, school board member, Zone 3.
And I'm Peter Vinci. I'm Zone 4, I think, and I'm chair this year for this board of directors.
I'm Kim Cusick. I'm the business director for Lincoln County School District.
Hi, Lisa Tolan, Superintendent.
Liz Martin, Board of Directors in Zone 2. Kelly Corbett, community member on the Budget Committee in Zone 4.
Matthew Grass, community member, Zone 3. Mitch Parsons, board of directors, Zone 1.
Okay, great. So now our next order of business is the election of the chair for this year's budget committee. Nominations?
I heard you did it last year.
I did it last year, so we should have some.
That's the way it worked.
It can be anyone from them.
Yeah.
I make a motion to nominate Matt Pratt. Sure.
I second.
Okay. Any other nominations? Okay, all in favor of Matt Grass, say aye.
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 Get the gavel.
Get the gavel.
Happened to me.
There you go. Thanks so much for doing that.
Crack that.
And if I could just orient you to what's on the table in front of you, you do have an agenda. It's a suggested agenda. The chair can and the committee can make different choices on the agenda. The purple sheet is suggested procedural rules and calendar guidance for you to use. And then there are some replacement sheets for your budget book. If you have a paper copy, we will update the online version as well. The budget message from the superintendent, the board goals had not been updated from the prior year, so we updated that. And then on the budget assumptions page, there's just one page there of that, and on the back side of that, you'll see some items in gray. I hadn't updated those from last year's figures, with those corrections. Go ahead and continue.
Okay, where am I coming from here?
So we're at establishing procedural rules and the calendar, which is on the purple.
And I need to read this out for you.
Yes, and if the committee can discuss it and make any changes to this. Or you can just approve it as is and move forward.
So, determine where on the agenda public comment will be heard, beginning of the meeting following the superintendent's budget message. Time limit, public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per person, 15 minutes total. Board policy CBEH applies.
Eddie, can you elaborate on that?
Pardon, I'm sorry.
Policy BDDH.
Is the public comment guidelines.
Okay. Multiple people want to speak on the same topic. The group will select one spokesperson who will be given 3 minutes to speak to the budget committee. At 8:20 p.m., stop the deliberations and plan for the next meeting. So we can proceed from there.
Yeah, Eddie, do we have any blue cards?
No blue cards have been submitted. Correspondence from Jessica, who's on her way but got caught in an accident, so she'll be arriving a little late, and we'll reflect it in the minutes the time she does arrive.
So we don't need public, we don't have any public.
Right, no
comments.
public comment, so
Yes.
move forward from here. So we have the commencement.
Might ask the committee if they would like
Is
to.
the committee ready to proceed?
Sounds good.
Do I get this?
That's till the end. I mean, you're the chair, you can hit it whenever you want.
We're just on the agenda. Dr. Tolman.
Okay, so now we're ready for the welcome and opening statement.
Right. Dear Lincoln County School District Budget Committee members and community, now in my second year as superintendent of Lincoln County School District, I worked in partnership with leaders to develop the 25-26 budget. This process has required a careful balance, upholding our commitment to equitable, high-quality education for every student, while responsibly managing a $181,390,495 budget. I don't really look at numbers like that. So in 2022-23, Oregon approved a $10.2 billion state school fund allocation for the biennium. As we prepare this budget for the first year of the 25-27 biennium, the projected state school fund has increased $11.36 billion. This projection serves as the foundation for Lincoln County School District proposed 25-26 budget. While this represents a historic investment in public education, the district continues to face financial challenges due to declining student enrollment and escalating operational costs. As a result, LCSD faced a $2.8 million shortfall in the operating budget during the first year of the biennium and expects even tougher financial decisions ahead in 26-27. This proposal includes a strategic use of $1 million in one-time cash reserves accumulated through temporarily unfilled positions, as well as one-time wildfire grant funds of $1,324,854. With this approach, it becomes increasingly important to conduct a comprehensive review of priorities and expenditures in order to align our resources and right-size the budget for long-term sustainability. The annual budgeting process serves as a meaningful opportunity to reflect on the Lincoln County School District Board of Education's strategic plan and goals, while also guiding the thoughtful application of our district's equity lens outlined in this document to inform decisions that align with the strategies in our continuous improvement plan. Developing a well-rounded, responsive budget demands collaborative and visionary leadership across the district to ensure we address the needs of every department and student. In accordance with ORS 294.391, I respectfully present the proposed 25-26 budget for the Lincoln County School District. The board goals: Goal 1, Lincoln County School District will establish and meet high expectations for student achievement. In Goal 2, we will create equitable, diverse, and inclusive, accessible learning environments across the district. In Goal 3, we will provide for the long-term health and welfare of our facilities, focusing on accessibility, technological innovation, and purposeful utilization. And in Goal 4, we will strengthen community relationships through communication and engagement with staff, students, families, and community partners.
the pages that are in front of you, we updated the board goals. That was the change.
Oh, sorry, we said that before you. I'm sorry. I'm slow down my list. Continuous improvement plan goals. We will continue to work to improve the four-year cohort graduation rate in all of our high schools up to 90% that we can maintain, and reach 90% attendance of regular attenders, which will be measured by 90% of our students attending 90% of the time each year. In estimated revenues, we have state school fund for 25-26 $22,621,328. In local property taxes, we estimate to collect $47,124,020. In other local revenue in the state school fund formula, we're expecting $1,458,590. In wildfire relief funds, $1,324,854. We have a beginning fund balance projected at $14,924,568. We have other sources that collect up to $2,920,359, and a total general fund revenue of $89,048,865. In estimated expenditures, the salary and fringe benefits. Consistent with our emphasis on using funds for the greatest student impact, the majority of our expenditures go towards staffing our educational system. Employee costs account for approximately 61% of the general fund budget. Due to declining enrollment, we have reduced 7 certified FTE, 2.5 classified FTE, 1 confidential FTE, and 1 administrative position across the district to help balance the 2025-2026 budget. In purchase services, utilities, transportation, and custodial services make up the majority of the purchase services for our district, totaling $11,298,880. These costs continue to rise faster than our revenue, with a 2.9% increase in transportation services, 3% increase in utilities, and 2.6% increase in custodial. Charter school funding totaling $6,373,669 is also budgeted under purchase services. In curriculum instruction and technology, professional development is continued for staff development and support in AVID, instructional coaching, professional learning community implementation, and curriculum adoption and development. We believe that technology is an integral part of our K-12 education to prepare students for the future. Building the classroom technology and cybersecurity are a prioritized part of our annual budget. Approximately 48% of the annual general fund budget is for curriculum, instruction, and technology. Additional funding is provided in the special revenue funds. The curriculum fund budget includes anticipated expenditures for 7th through 12th grade math, social sciences, and Spanish adoptions. Well-rounded education. The 2025-2026 budget includes providing music and physical education instruction in all schools, regardless of their size, counseling services, social workers, increased bilingual family and student support, and access to extracurricular activities without cost for secondary students. In our charter school agreement, 7% of the general fund budget is a per pupil allocation transferred directly to Siletz Valley Charter and Eddyville Charter School. Community Services Consortium notified LCSD in January of 2024 that Career Tech Charter School would close on June 30th, 2024. Although a new entity submitted an application to open a new Career Tech Charter School, the application was not approved for the 24-25 school year, and a new application was not submitted. Facilities and maintenance, 3% of the total general fund budget is used for facility and maintenance needs. Although LCSD has a proposed facility renewal bond on the May 2025 ballot, that ballot measure does not account for the day-to-day facility and maintenance operating needs that exist for the health and welfare of our properties for our staff and students. Ending fund balance and contingency fund, the Lincoln County School District Board of Education requires a minimum 7% ending fund balance in the general fund each year in order to provide a starting cash balance for the coming year. This is budgeted as unappropriated ending fund balance in the amount of $5,449,457. Contingency remains budgeted at $3,750,000. Debt service is for long-term financing. These funds are used to finance and account for the interest and principal payments on all PERS and general obligation bonds. In our district, we have 2 debt service areas. General obligation bonds are issued to fund the construction and remodeling of all school buildings. The most recent renovations were bonded in 2011 and are set to expire in June 2026. We have transfers of $6,695,000 scheduled for deposit into the sinking fund, Fund 331, in order to save funds for the $15 million balloon payment on the remainder of the bonds. The Public Employees Retirement System PERS bonds. The district issued bonds in 2002 and 2003 to prepay the district's portion of the PERS unfunded liability and lower LCSD's employer contribution rate. The bond proceeds remitted to PERS remain in a PERS side account for LCSD and continue to reduce LCSD's PERS employer contribution rate from 28.707% to 0% for 2025 to 2027. LCSD continues to decrease the rate charged against payroll for debt service payments to prevent having excess funds in the account when the bonds are paid in full in June 2028. Reducing this payroll expense over time offsets revenue losses in the state school fund due to declining enrollment and other factors. In 2025-2026, we will again reduce our PERS bond rate from 11% to 9%, reducing general fund payroll expenses by $343,606 or 1% of the reduction. The remaining 1% will be held in a new PERS reserve fund, so funds can be saved to offset the anticipated rate increase when the bonds are fully paid and the remaining rate credit from the bond side account expires. Debt service payments are scheduled at $6,167,240. Special revenue funds, all federal, state, and local grants and other special revenue funds are budgeted within the guidelines and constraints of each unique field. These funds are itemized throughout the budget document, include funding for curriculum, technology, building maintenance, music, outdoor school, and the Student Investment or SIA account. In closing, the 25-26 total estimated expenditures are $181,390,495. This is an increase from the 2024-2025 budget of $8,853,287, a decrease of $633,753 in the general fund, and an increase of $9,542,040 in the special revenue, debt service, capital, and self-insurance funds. The district continues to use and leverage state funding from the student investment account totaling $5,345,320. Despite the loss of funding due to declining enrollment, Lincoln County School District will continue to use its equity lens to review board strategic goals and comprehensive school improvement goals and strategies. We will gather ongoing community, family, staff, and student feedback to allocate resources to support learning acceleration and support every student. I'd like to thank the business department for their incredible amount of work preparing the 25-26 budget document. Thank you to our budget committee for their volunteer time to review the LCSD school board goals, equity lens, and budget document. This budget presented to you supports your work and the implementation of our mission, every child, every day, future ready.
Thank you, Dr. Boland. The next item of business is public comment, of which we have 0 at this point. So from there, we can jump to committee responsibilities and budget assumptions.
Some of what I'm going to say is a bit of a repeat from what she said. Sometimes it helps to hear it in a different way. If you have questions, go ahead and ask me. We may collect them until the end, but if you have questions as we go along, then ask. So Lincoln County School District's mission and vision. Our vision is empowering all students every day to realize their full potential for living the future life they imagine. And our mission is relentlessly committed to ensuring that all students learn the critical reading and thinking skills needed to be educated, healthy, and resilient people that graduate with future options and the ability to achieve their dreams. You may recognize these pictures. These are the ones from last year. I'm sorry I didn't update them, but this is why we do this, so that we are graduating students. The The Lincoln County School District Equity Tools, Vision of Equity through board and policy commitment. Our unified vision is to welcome, accept, and affirm equitable practices that break down barriers, promote access and voice, and advance ongoing opportunities for an equitable education for all. The mission of our equity tool, our mission is to bring forth intentional and impactful actions through intentional discourse and policy review, current and future, that prioritize data and professional learning to assert cultural relevance and representation that provide necessary skills to meet the needs of all students. Again, this is why we're here. Kids. Oh boy, I was gonna have you guys read these. That's pretty small. I'll go ahead and read them. The 5 Ps of our equity lens tool that we apply to decisions here in the district. Number 1 is purpose. Center equity and inclusivity so that students, families, and systems do not experience barriers throughout our district. People, thoughtful in language, respectful of the past and present trauma of marginalized groups, recognizing the struggle for civil rights and equity. The trauma and process our underserved people have endured deserves to be treated with gravity and solemnity. Place. Recognize environmental and geographical impacts on resource allocation and hold space for access to equitable resources, not hindered by geographic location, socioeconomic status, varying neuro abilities, or demographics. Process. The equity lens addresses policy barriers and processes through open and honest discourse and decision-making, which result in empowering, supporting, and reducing the traumatization of people. And the 5th P is power. The equity lens, through genuine shared power and authentic shared decision-making, contributes to strong problem-solving and action that moves forward equitable policies, boards, and communities. The board's strategic goals, Dr. Tolan already mentioned those in her message, as well as the continuous improvement plans. Again. Okay, budget committee responsibilities. Public meeting laws apply to these meetings. All meetings must have public notice and minutes are required. And we have our business services supervisor, Carol Finley, is taking minutes for us. District staff handles all public notices and minutes, so the budget committee doesn't need to worry about any of that. Members may not meet with more than 5 other budget committee members to discuss the budget outside of the scheduled and noticed meetings. That includes via email, text, and video. To do so would constitute a meeting of the budget committee, and you can't do that without a public notice. Again, board policy BDDH applies to the meetings of the budget committee. And while board members are on the committee, they are acting as budget committee members, not board members. So they may not make board decisions, create or change policy, cut or add programs, or change employee bargaining agreements, as those are duties of the board. Oregon ethics laws also apply. That's in ORS 244. Members may be related to district staff, but you must publicly disclose that during the meeting. Potential and actual conflicts of interest must also be publicly disclosed and may require abstention from voting. Do you have anybody with any conflicts?
Mine's not a conflict, but my daughter has been recently hired at Fort High School.
Anybody else? Thank you. And members may not use this position for personal gain. The approved budget must be for the educational plans that have been previously determined by the board. And the committee may not add or delete programs, just like the board members on the committee cannot do these things that the rest of the committee may not do as well. You cannot develop or adjust district policies, adjust staffing or negotiating contracts, including the collective bargaining agreements with employees. and our contracted services such as food services, custodial, or transportation. Those are all duties of the board, not the budget committee. Any questions about that? You have a responsibility to receive the proposed budget document and the budget message, which you're doing tonight. You can ask questions about the proposed budget. You may request additional information from district staff on any questions you have about items that are in the budget. But these requests should be made through the superintendent if they're not made during a budget committee meeting. You're responsible to receive public comment and questions on the proposed budget during scheduled meetings. We gave opportunity for that. It was in the public notice, but we have no public comment tonight. District staff, not the committee, will answer any questions from the public or the committee. You're here to review the budget assumptions to determine if the estimates for revenue and expenses are reasonable, to discuss, deliberate, and test the budget against district and board goals and policies to ensure that the budget reflects those goals appropriately. You may adjust the general fund discretionary budget lines by up to 10% of the general fund budget. This year, that's $8.9 million roughly, within the following restrictions. 61% of the budget is payroll, and those rates cannot be changed. Up to 17% of the remaining budget is restricted by contracts, and it must be budgeted within the contractual restraints. And 7% is the board-required unappropriated ending fund balance, and that cannot be changed unless the total expenditures change. Funds other than the general fund are generally restricted, and those budgets cannot be changed unless there are inaccuracies or the cost and revenue estimates are unreasonable. Our budget is appropriated or budgeted at the major function level. That's the piece of our account number. There's the fund and then there's the function. So small changes at the detailed function or the object level are unnecessary. So we budget at the 1,000 function, for instance, that's educational, instructional, but there's several functions underneath that, 1111 for elementary, 1131 high school, etc. So changes at those line levels aren't really necessary because we're just appropriating the full amount for the 1,000 functions. Similarly, 2,000 functions for support services. And then the object level is those specific items that you're purchasing, either salaries and benefits or purchase services or supplies, that kind of thing, fees. The function and object detail is really only included for transparency and understanding. We actually aren't required to provide that information, but we do for better understanding and transparency with the public. Another of your responsibilities is to approve the proposed budget and the tax levy amounts and specify the maximum property tax rate, but that tax rate is determined by the county. I have provided legally sufficient draft motions for you written out, so when we get to that point, if you're ready, you don't have to guess at what that needs to be. I've got the words for you. A majority vote of the entire committee, not a majority of those present at the meeting, is required to approve the budget. This year, quorum is 6, which is one more than half of the committee. But since we have everyone here, great. Thank you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. And the budget committee's work is done for the year once you've approved the budget and the tax levy amounts. Following approval of the proposed budget by the budget committee, district staff will post the approved budget notice to the district website, publish the public budget hearing notice with the financial summary in the Lincoln County Leader and on the district website. And then the board will conduct a public hearing on June 10th on the 25-26 approved budget. Public comment will be accepted there as well as per normal board processes. And the board will discuss, modify by up to 10% if desired, and adopt the 2025-26 budget at their regular board meeting that same night, June 10th. Adoption is required by June 30th. I have a slide in here. I think, oh, I know where it is. On the calendar guidelines, we do have, our public notice included 3 meetings if they're needed. If you approve the budget tonight, then we won't need the additional meetings, but the next 2 meeting dates we had scheduled for Tuesday, May 20th and May 22nd. Final deliberation must conclude on May 27th, which allows enough time to properly notice the budget hearing that's scheduled for June 10th. If we were to not finish by that date, we would need to hold a public hearing and board meeting on a separate date after that date. And it has to be done by law by June 30th. Any questions so far? So for the 2025-27 biennial state school fund revenue, the governor's, we've all been using the governor's budget of 11.36 billion. Paid us 49% in the first year and 51% in the second year of the biennium. However, that amount is now in question following the release of the May 14th state revenue forecast, which was down approximately $800 million. The cat tax revenue was down as well, and that funds our SIA account, which is Fund 289, where we also have the majority of that budget is salaries as well. Do you want to talk about that anymore? The other piece is we don't expect additional funds from the legislature for special education weighting. We're talking about increasing the cap, and we don't expect that now, and we don't expect any additional funds to be added for high cost facility. That's the part that's really added. Any questions about that?
Well, so I mean, I read the executive summary of the forecast that came out on Wednesday. And I mean, but my takeaway from it was that it was extremely uncertain still.
Yes.
The biggest takeaway, which just seems like the word of the year so far. And so what does that mean for this process?
Good question.
Okay.
I'm going to get to that right next. So Oregon's 2024 Quality Education Model, also known as the QEM, that's the last time it was released, recommended $12.7 billion for this biennium. So the 11.36 is the closest we've gotten to the QEM, but now that the forecast is down, I don't think we'll get the 11.36. Our district adopts annual budgets authorizing spending for the coming year only. Okay, I did talk about that somewhere in here. Let's just keep going, and because I do answer that question on another slide. Our proposed budget is based on 6,078.02 extended ADMW. The district is paid on the higher of the prior year's ADMW or the current or projected ADMW, which is known as extended ADMW. And I know all of the committee has been in training to understand these terms. I think there might be some of the audience that maybe don't understand all of the terms that are on here. There is a training out on the website if you're interested in that. This proposed budget is based on the 24-25 ADMW because it is higher than the estimated 25-26 ADMW, which I'm projecting at 5,852.9. That's because kindergarten is estimated at 263 students, and the outgoing 12th grade class was 434.8, and that's a drop of 171.8 students, with total enrollment projected at 4,536.5 ADM. Now, I turn that information into the state and they calculate the weights on those, on that ADM, and they came up with okay. I turn in the 4,536 ADM, and they calculate the 5,852.9 ADMW. If enrollment does not increase in 25-26, we anticipate a drop of 225.12 ADMW for the 2026-27 fiscal year budget, as the 25-26 ADMW will then be used for the SSF payments. So as we're in declining enrollment every 2 years, it drops a big chunk. We're losing about 100 to 171, 100 to 200 students every year, but the resulting ADMW is higher than that.
We also, just to interject, Kim, on our website, you can see the board had us do a long-term demographic study to see what it looked like over time. That population decrease is going to be across the county, and it shows the continued decline for 10 years. So we're 2 years into the 10-year projected decline, but it does show that that will continue, and it's not just in one spot of Lincoln County that it looks like, it's dispersed all throughout the county itself.
It's primarily in the primary grades, kindergarten through third grade, because birth rates are declining, and as those continue to drop, that lower number, rolls up, and the larger classes graduate out, and so as a result, we have lower enrollment. At our current rates, that equates to a loss of nearly $2.5 million in revenue in 2026-27, with all other things being equal in the formula. And that's not including the wildfire money that we are going to lose as well. So just a preview of what's to come.
Kim, can I just make
Sure.
a comment that is a statewide trend with the attendance going down. It's not just Lincoln County.
Very true.
Yes.
And it started, it started in around 2020 though, right?
It did. We dropped about 400 students that first year,
And then
and
some
we
back
just
with
didn't,
it.
we didn't gain very many
No
back.
house.
Yeah,
Because
it pretty much flattened out,
the
but
wildfires was a big hit to it. And then we just never.
right. But the state of Oregon during COVID lost 30,000 ADM. They just went out of the system, either to homeschool or, private schools, or just out of the state, and they don't know where they went. 48% of that loss, was in Lynn, Benton, and Lincoln counties, statewide.
And now
48%.
it's still in these lower grades.
Yes,
And we're not seeing students come
Right.
back at any point.
people just aren't having kids. There's a decline in the birth rate, and there's been a decline in the in-migration. We used to have a lot of people moving in-state from other areas, and that has slowed as well. So all of that contributes to this decline.
Is there any, because there are a few more different schools in the area now too.
That does,
Is that contributing
it
as well?
does,
No.
it does some.
It does. The demographic study we did though does take all of that into account. So one on the website looks at just overall, and they asked for a list of who the private schools are, worked with LBL, and what's the homeschool list look like. So it was a comprehensive study, not just on our schools itself, but on the county populations.
Right.
That's really interesting.
Okay, the proposed budget is based on $10,983 per extended ADMW for our general purpose grant. That excludes the transportation grant. So total state school fund revenues budgeted at $71 million. Local revenues projected at $48 million. State revenues projected at around $18 million. And the 70% state transportation grant revenues budgeted at about $4.4 million. So those three things combined make up the $71,000 in the state school fund revenue. Again, remember, As local revenue increases, the amount we get from the state decreases, and if local revenue declines, then we get more money from the state. We get the same amount, it just balances itself out.
Is
Yes.
that the, what you would call the reimbursable transportation?
Yes. Our wildfire grant funds, those were approved by the legislature in 22-23 for districts who lost housing for students in the 2020 wildfires. Ours was primarily in the Otis area. The funding for this is determined by comparing each year's ADMW to the 1920 ADMW. So pre-fire ADMW. The 24-25 revenue was received on May 10th in the amount of $1.324,854 in the general fund. We didn't expect to get that until after the end of the year and possibly not even until December, but we did receive it in May. So that was a bit of a surprise. That has been budgeted as part of our beginning fund balance this year, for next year. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, there's a current bill that's proposing a one-year extension on that. And prior to the revenue forecast, I was feeling a little bit more confident that there would be a one-year extension. The idea of that was to give all of the wildfire impacted districts kind of a 1 year, like now it's out. So what does your true transition year look like? Because of all of the districts, they haven't rebounded to the level that it was anticipated. And so we'll continue to have that conversation and send in our numbers and work with our local legislators about that. But it doesn't sound like it's in the same position because it was going to be an additional fund and an additional ask of the legislature.
We also received additional funds for losses to the special funds accounts for our SIA and high school success grants, because those are also based on ADMW. We received about $104,000 for the SIA and $31,000 for high school success. All of these funds are used for various positions in the TAP area schools. And as Dr. Tolan said, this is the final revenue we will receive unless the legislature approves a one-year extension. Sorry, it's okay. Now, the loss of these funds doesn't mean we'll just cut all those positions in the TAP area. It doesn't work that way because these are general fund revenues. And so it just goes in as part of the state school fund. So we will look at overall need and not just strictly cut the TAP area positions, but there will be some cuts in that area. Okay, I do have a change on this. As I was preparing my slides today, I did find an error in our beginning fund balance estimate. We had, in the proposed budget, I budgeted at $14,924,568. That really should be $1 million less. I did not account for the school discretionary carryover when I was comparing it to the actual cash flow report that I gave to the board on Tuesday. And so I need to reduce the beginning fund balance by $1 million, and that will be offset with a reduction in the transfers that we had budgeted. And I've got some documentation for that as well, for a little bit later.
Do you want to explain to everyone what that means, how we use that school discretionary, where that million is at?
Yeah,
Okay.
Let me get down a little further. It's okay. So as Dr. Tolan said, we've got about $5.4 million in unappropriated ending fund balance. That's part of our beginning fund balance. That is cash that carries us through the summer until we start receiving our tax revenues in the fall. I budgeted $1,042,335 for school discretionary carryover. That has been, we allow our school buildings to carry over their discretionary, any unused funds at the end of the year, they get to carry that over and use it for the following year. We did that several years ago. I don't even know how long
I
ago it's been.
So 17 years.
Yeah.
It's been that way the whole time.
Yeah, it hasn't been that the whole time that I've been here. It used to be that the buildings, it was use it or lose it. And believe me, at the end of the year, they would just spend it because they were going to lose it, and they were not being thoughtful about it. And that is not in the best interest of students or our schools. And so we decided to let them carry that money over, and that allows them to save things like furniture, playgrounds, these larger purchases that they can't make in 1 year out of the discretionary budget. So that's been really beneficial. And as I said, I had budgeted for that, but when I compared it to the actual cash flow that we have, I hadn't considered that wasn't taken out of that bottom line number. So we do need to adjust that because while it is an estimate, I really don't expect it to be the 14 million. It's going to be closer to 13.
We've also, just to add on that, we've talked with staff throughout this year, and many of our administrators know that when we hit major budget deficits 10 years ago, because buildings were allowed to carry over and keep their own discretionary, they were able to use that to help offset our costs. So then it was like everybody worked together with that money that was in the buildings so that we could maintain as much as possible with that. And that's a conversation that we've been having even this year, really using next year to look at where truly are we spending in each one of our departments and at our building level so that we can make really sound decisions as we continue to have declining enrollment and not just blanket cuts everywhere. Those can happen, but there's also really strategic cuts if we're using an equity lens. It doesn't just mean everybody has to take the same amount. There's some specific needs we need to fill. So that's what we've been in the process of working on with our buildings.
And the reason that is $1 million for 11 schools, and some schools have more than others, but I have been cautioning them over the past several years, knowing that we're likely facing declining enrollment. We knew that ESSER grants were going away, and that they wouldn't have the opportunity necessarily to continue to save by using grants. I've been cautioning them to hang on to some of those funds so that they would have that money for the lean years that are likely coming. 1.68 to 682,776 is carryover from the Oregon Wildfire Grant. That is money from the 23-24 award as well as the 24-25, that 1.3 million. And then we have 3.75 million in contingency. All of those are restricted amounts that can't be changed. We actually, let me rephrase that. The top three really can't be changed. The contingency amount could be modified, but right now it is restricted for that. If the budget committee wanted to make a different decision about that, you could. The really discretionary amounts are the transfers to the special revenue funds for future expenditures. We had planned 2 million, but as I said, I had overestimated that, so I'm reducing that to $1 million. That's coming from our additional beginning fund balance that we had in 24-25. We had grants that were used in 23-24 to cover some of our general fund expenditures, so that all the grant funds were spent out timely. That resulted in a higher than budgeted beginning fund balance in 24-25. As I've said at board meetings, I don't expect those larger excesses to continue. A lot of that's been because of our COVID grants and because since COVID, we've had trouble filling positions, but that has balanced itself out this year. We have very few open positions compared to the last 4 or 5 years. So I anticipate that our excesses from our operating revenues are going to sharply decline, and because our costs are going up while our revenues are declining sharply.
And can these, the $9 transfers that are going to be, okay, just what I was looking for.
So curriculum was, we had, in the proposed budget, we had $1 million to curriculum and $1 million to technology, and I've reduced both of those to 500,000 each.
So we're going to be adopting social studies, science, and Spanish, is that right?
Yes.
And we have some other areas. We have other money in the curriculum. fund,
We do.
right?
Yeah,
we have-
and you
we have
can,
enough
you
to
can
cover.
see in the budget document, yes, we do.
Okay. I think we've been really successful implementing standard curriculum across the district, and that's something that as a budget committee that the board member continue.
Yeah, that was one thing during the recession in '08, we cut everything to the bone to keep teachers in classrooms. We cut out all curriculum purchases and discretionary budgets at the district central level. So during the last several years where we've had excess revenues, the board was, I think, wise several years back pre-COVID in establishing that 7% ending fund balance, and then specifying that any excesses that are one-time gains for that year be moved to special revenue funds just to plan for, just like we do with the building carryover, plan for purchase of curriculum and technology. That one's becoming even more important now. And also for building maintenance, some of those other things that we have out there, music fund. So we do have significant balances in those funds that will carry us for a few years, which is fortunate. With these transfers, this is something that is discretionary. It is something that the budget committee could make a different choice about, but it does all have to balance within the amount of money that we do have. And then we used $1 million of our excess ending fund balance or cash to balance the budget, to balance that $2.8 million shortfall.
And that came from the unfilled positions.
Yeah.
At some point. So were those positions unfilled because they couldn't be filled, or were they unfilled because there was an attempt to kind of carry over some of that?
No, just, we didn't have applicants,
Didn't
or,
have- yeah,
or we would
okay.
fill the position and then they would leave.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. A lot of those were special ed positions.
Yeah.
And a lot in the North
Right.
area.
Well, that's what I would always assume, but
Yes.
I don't, you know.
Okay, other revenue assumptions, we do get money from our ESD, the Educational Service District, in Tier 2. That funding is scheduled at $395,122 for 0.85 FTE for our early childhood coordinator, the school resource officers support for the East and South area, student information system support specialist at 0.88 FTE, our attendance specialist, 1.0, and some tag testing fees. Additionally, we get indirect cost revenues from our grants. I'm budgeting that down $210,753. It's a reduction due to having fewer anticipated grants and because our ESSER grants have expired. So that is revenue to the general fund that will not be there this year. And then I'm also projecting interest revenue to be down $285,000 roughly because interest rates are declining still and the federal economic climate is unstable as well, as mentioned.
What interest rate are you basing that on? 4 or less?
No, I just reduced it by 70. I reduced it by 75%.
Oh, okay. Wow.
275%.
Okay.
275% of the current
Okay.
year.
Okay.
That is another area where we've seen a lot of our excess ending fund balance come in because interest rates climbed so quickly, and I budgeted lower because that's not revenue you can necessarily count on. Those do fluctuate. We had gone through several years of declining interest rates, and then and they were at like 0.5% for years, and then in recent years they've been around 5%, and now they're dropping again. Okay, on the expense side, we did reduce 7 licensed FTE, about $840,000. That's using our average teacher cost for an open position. That FTE was reduced by attrition to right-size our classroom due to our sustained enrollment losses. We reduced one at Ocean Lake, one at Taft Elementary, one at Sandcase, two at Toledo Elementary, and one at Crestview Heights. And then we also, we had two long-term subs budgeted and filled over the last couple of years, but we've reduced that by one. So we retained one in reserve for either a long-term sub or if we have an increase in elementary, for instance, at the kindergarten level.
I'm just remembering that the declining enrollment is still being felt as those classes are coming in at the elementary level and as they continue to move up to the high school. So it wasn't that we didn't look at secondary, but their class sizes are still at a larger
Stable.
Yeah, they're still stable. But your next bullet.
Nope.
Okay.
No, thanks. Classified FTE reductions, we had some open positions that we reduced. We had a half-time HR information tech, and then the two future-bound teaching assistant positions were reduced, one in the north and one in the west area. We also have a reduction in administrative and confidential. 0.98 of that affected the general fund and 1.02 for a total of 2 FTE was in the special funds there. So that's the assistant superintendent and the confidential administrative assistant, total reduction in the general fund of $178,000. They are retiring and we are not refilling those positions. We thank them for their service. Many long years. The assistant superintendent was 0.23 FTE in the general fund, and the admin assistant was 0.75 in the general fund, with the remainder being in special revenue funds. And then $45,000 of these funds that we saved were used, were added back to retain the assistant superintendent on a 1-year contract to assist us with legal processes for the transition and training of other staff. That's a very important thing that she does for us. And we need to retain her expertise and get some people trained up in that area. Discretionary budgets were reduced 15% in order to balance the budget. That was a total of $1,111,485. That included central budgets for $992,000 of that. The central budget discretionary budgets total is $23,224,012 with that reduction. That excludes our contracted services, our utilities, and insurance, because we don't have control over reducing those contracts. We still need those services. Our property and liability insurance was increased 17.5% to cover premium increases. Unfortunately, again, that was quite a high number. Our utility budgets were increased an average of 3%. For student transportation was a 2.9% based on CPIU December to December for their contract. Sodexo custodial is 2.6% CPIW November to November. And Sodexo nutrition services, which is a special revenue fund, not in the general fund, but I wanted to list it here as well. That's a 2.5% increase. And we also added $200,000 out of some of these savings to the board's budget to support potential federal grant lawsuits. We were advised by ODE and others that would be prudent to have some money budgeted for that, based on Oregon's stance with the DEI. All school budgets were reduced 15%. This is their discretionary budgets. That was a total of $119,000 that we reduced, but remember they've got $1 million in carryover to help backfill that.
And they started working last year on what that could look like, as we could see this come so preliminary. Like you had to cut 10% right now, what would that look like if you had to cut 15, if you had to cut 20? So those were conversations we've been having over 2 years, and this was necessary.
Their budgets are based on projected ADM for their school, and we do increase that amount in November if their ADM has gone up. If their ADM goes down, we hold them harmless. We don't take money away from them. That's budgeted in our budget as a 10% reserve so that we have the funds to do that. The non-athletic co-curricular allocations, we gave them a 2% COLA increase plus a 3% average step increase because those are salaries. Again, those are based on projected ADM, and they will be increased in November again if the ADM has increased. Athletics, general fund total is a little over $1 million. 737,000 roughly is coaching salaries and the fixed costs at current staffing levels. But that does include 4 new positions at Toledo Junior Senior High for a soccer head, football assistant, track assistant, and a baseball assistant, as well as 3 new positions at Newport High for 2 football assistants, 1 soccer assistant, and we changed one of the cross-country positions to a competition chair. That's a total increase of only $8,721. And if you paid attention to prior budgets, that's usually around $80,000. So I looked at that because I was really curious why it was so low. But it's because we have lots of coaches, newer coaches, and they're at a lower step. And then we have several experienced coaches that are at step 7, which is the top step. And so then there's also the balance between community coaches and staff coaches. Most of our community coaches aren't eligible for PERS, and so that reduces our fixed costs significantly. So that balance, all of those things played into that relatively low increase in that budget. And then we have about $35,000 budgeted for substitutes when our staff are absent for competitions. $362,000 is budgeted in the SIA, Fund 289, for our pay-to-play fees and for our middle school coaches.
And pay to play is listed, that's what we still call it, because in our handbook, we have what it costs to pay to play, but we now absorb pay to play through this account, and we don't charge families for students to play the sport. So
For sport, but we do charge for a second or third.
in the same season.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I didn't put this on here, but the 1 million in the general fund plus the 363,000 roughly in the SIA, that it's about $1.4 million total athletics. The pay-to-play fees were increased this year by $50 per participant. That's a significant increase. Those rates hadn't been increased for a while. And that was done to help defray the increased cost of game officials. The last 2 years, they've really jumped. We were able to give them some additional money at this last year from the SIA. We had some open positions, so we had some excess funds there, and we were able to supplement this year, but we increased the actual allocation for the coming year to account for that.
Just want to say I really appreciate your ability to do that. I know people are really struggling with trying to find ways to meet the increased officiating costs, and that's going to help out.
I will caution, though, that the SIA is based on ADMW as well. And so, as I said, salaries are our main expense in that fund. And as those continue to decline and the revenue goes down, it's going to crunch that budget more. And so we're going to have to make some decisions there in the next few years. Okay, employee costs. All of the allocations were based on existing staffing except for the reductions that I noted earlier. License was budgeted at a 2% COLA plus their 3.5% step for a total 5.5% increase. We're negotiating the full contract with the LCA right now. So I've used an average roll-up cost that we use every year when contract negotiations aren't finalized. And we typically, in the past, have always used a 2% roll-up just on discretionary budgets as well. Any higher bargain increase will have to come from our excess ending fund balance contingency or reduction of other budgeted items such as staffing or discretionary budgets. The confidential exempt budget is 4% COLA plus a 3% step for a 7% increase per their contract currently. Classified as a 3.75% COLA with a 2.5% step for a total of 6.25% increase. And administrators follow the license contract. They don't get step, so it's just a 2% COLA for administrators. Medical, dental, vision, and life insurance. We budget that on a cap basis per employee. Licensed admin cap has been increased by $50 a month for a total of $20,285 per year per person, subject to the final bargaining agreement. That's our current offer. Our classified cap increased $50 for their existing contract to $20,885 a year. Confidential exempt supervisory staff remain at $1692.37 a month. I didn't put the annual in there, sorry. All employees have no out-of-pocket premium costs for all coverages. And all employees participate in the district's group HRA for medical insurance, which provides additional benefits with reduced deductibles and out-of-pocket costs. Okay, PERS. We have a 49.46% rate relief that will continue for the 25-27 biennium due to bonding our unfunded actuarial liability, also known as UAL, in 2002 and 03. Without selling those bonds, we would be paying an average 28.07 contribution rate, employer contribution rate right now. The actual employer contribution rate right now is 0%. Then we have the debt service rate that's charged against payroll that we use to pay off those bonds. We reduced that from 11% to 9%. As Dr. Tolan said, we are building reserves for our future bond service payments, but the excesses are building in that account because the bonds will be fully paid in June of 28. And so as payroll increases, we need to decrease the rate that we're charging against that larger payroll because we don't want to have an excess in that fund when those bonds are paid off. So we do need to look at continuing to reduce that, and we do review that annually. I do expect that to be around 3% when the bonds are paid off. We're going to use 1% of that reduction to balance the general fund budget, and the remaining 1% will be used to start a PERS reserve fund that the board will need to approve.
I was gonna ask you about that.
Yeah, in the next year. We'll need to do
Okay,
that.
so it's not an immediate need for us to,
This will be for July 1.
okay.
That money will be used to offset rate increases in the year that the rate credit expires. From what we've been told by PERS at this point, that might be around 2030, which is only a few years past when the bonds are paid off. Initially, they thought, were telling us it would last 10 years beyond when the bonds were paid off, and so that's quite the shortened timeline, which is why I'm recommending that we begin this PERS reserve fund right now. Additionally, if there are excesses in that debt service fund, when those bonds are paid off, that can be moved to the PERS reserve fund. And the district continues to pick up or pay the employee 6% contributions, and that's about $2 million. We do have positions that are no longer in the general fund. They continue to be paid out of the SIA fund, as I've mentioned a few times. That's all of our elementary counselors, our elementary math and reading TOSAs. One of our Hispanic family liaisons was in the general fund, now is in SIA. We do have 2 of those positions in SIA, but one of them was new. 9.8 FTE for music teachers. The nurses, that actually should be 3. And structured learning center teacher for 1.0. That should be, the nurses are 3.0 FTE. So when the SIA started several years ago, because we didn't have enough funding in the general fund for these positions, we moved all of these positions over to SIA. So as I said, as the SIA, these wages continue to go up and the revenue continues to go down. We may have some hard choices to make. These are the positions that we felt were really important in the general fund to maintain. There was a point where we didn't have those counselors. And we had 1 district nurse. So we're fortunate to be able to have these positions funded still. And we've added a lot more than that with the SIA funds. That's just the ones that we moved. Okay, so our total budget increase from the 24-25 budget is $8,853,287. It's a decrease of around $689,000 in the general fund adopted budget compared to the general fund adopted budget. And an increase of $9.5 million in the special funds, debt service, capital improvements, and self-insurance funds combined. A large chunk of that is in the debt service fund because we are transferring funds because of the way the accounting works. We have to collect funds in the debt service fund 330, and then we move them to the sinking fund 331. And so that $6.695 million transfer inflates that budget. Our state school funding and our federal funding are uncertain at this point, and the budget might need to be reduced further, as we discussed earlier. Kelly question. And license negotiations are ongoing. However, the proposed budget can still be approved as presented because a supplemental budget is only needed for more than a 10% change in the fund. And that's $8.9 million. I'm not expecting it to drop that far, so we'll still be okay without having to do a supplemental budget. If we did need to do a supplemental budget, that's not a huge lift. We've done it before.
Does the whole committee come back together for that? We've done it for a long time.
Yeah, we've done it for a long time. I'd have to look into that.
Based on how much would be in that supplemental budget, because we just did one.
It's not likely that we'll need to do that. If the change is less than 10%, then we don't, the board can do the supplemental budget by resolution, and we don't need the budget committee. So I don't expect that to happen. We're not going to reach that amount of decline. We do need
You don't think so?
And then that would be $4.8 million roughly for the special revenue funds. So if federal grants were to decline significantly, we might need a supplemental budget for that. The district does have a list of possible reductions if we've started a list. If our state school funding is reduced, we were hoping not to do those until next year, but we may need to consider something this year. We'll see. And the planning has also begun for possible reductions in federal funding. As Dr. Tolan said, as with the discretionary budgets, we've been talking about possible cuts in the federal budgets as well. We asked them to do flat funding at a 10%, a 25% reduction, and what would that look like? So they are thinking about that already. And I just want to thank everybody that's helped create the budget document. Carol from our business office, and Kendra Wiles and Malika Byrne, our grant accountants, all of our grant managers, the central administrators, principals, and all our support staff worked really hard to get all of this information together to me to get this budget document together. Any questions? Before we do move on, I do have a document here to outline.
I do have a question about the EDM and whether or not it's adjusted for inflation each year. Is that part of the calculation?
No, ADM is the average daily membership, so that's enrollment.
So that's a lot. Okay, but so then the amount that goes.
The dollars per
The
ADM
dollars.
is determined by the amount of state school fund that the state gives us. So if it's 11.36, and they take some stuff off the top, like our high class disability grant and the small school funds, and there's in the budget document, there's a page that shows all the things they take off the top. Then they distribute the rest of that to the districts based on the ADM that you have. So they determine a dollar amount per ADM. So this is the suggested changes to the proposed budget document regarding the reduction for the general fund beginning balance because it was overestimated by not considering funds held for school carryover when compared to the general fund cash flow report. Therefore, the general fund budget for beginning fund balance and transfers out needs to be reduced by $1 million. Transfers in and contingency reserve funds for the curriculum fund and technology fund need to be reduced by $500,000 each for a total $1 million reduction in the special funds budget. And these are the entries we would need to make in the budget itself. The revenue accounts are indicated as a credit. We typically have a credit balance, so the change to that is a positive number, and that might be confusing to you, but it makes sense to the business office. And then transfers out are the expenses, so those are the opposite direction. In the general fund, there's $20 sitting there for a placeholder in case we have other funds that need to transfer. We are able to transfer money out too. So for the transfer outline, for instance, their proposed amount is currently at $2,020,000. I propose that we reduce that by $1 million. So the new total would be $1,020,000 and so forth down the line. Do you have questions about this document?
Well, by doing this now, you balance the budget.
Yes. This will correct the beginning fund balance that was overestimated. So I would suggest that the committee make a motion and adopt these changes.
So we can correct.
Yes, so that it can be corrected in the approved budget when we're done. You all have other business to do, but I wanted to put this out here, and I do have a motion for you to read. If whenever you're ready to do that, you pass that down.
So this motion is not the whole budget, it's the correction.
This is just the correction to the beginning fund balance and transfers. That's all this is, believe it or not. That's a lot of information. And you can do that now or later. The next section is discussion. So you can wait until you're ready to make other changes if you need to, or you can do it now. It's up to you.
Well, I think we can just open it up for discussion at this point, and then we can just run through the motions. After that, if there's any other questions? Anything else to discuss here about?
I have a couple of questions. With the reduction in the discretionary funds for each building, are any of those, they've been warned or told that, hey, this is coming, but are they going to do without a necessity?
I don't think so. I think they're evaluating, I think we all are evaluating what is a necessity when we've been in Esther. I think we're very smart with the way we do spend our money, but they're able to look at what's a necessity in year one, what's a necessity in year 2 and year 3. We've talked a lot about Although we adopt an annual budget, we spend annually and they propose to us a budget annually. With the budget our size and the buildings our size, they really can't be thinking that in a 1-year framework. So if they had thought, I'm going to replace 3 classrooms of furniture in maybe year 1, it might be that we don't do as many in year 1 and we do some in year 2. So we've asked them to really look at that, including in our federal funding and in some of our central budgets, even having principals look at what does the central office really pay for them, and what are areas that they see maybe we can put on a different cycle for payment. So that's where they're at right now. And part of it too, Jason, I think is a good question to ask, because there are a lot of things that have been since Dr. Gray came and started the allocation in that realm and the district office got larger. There became central budgets here that were covering things that previously, like when I was a principal, my building budget needed to cover. And so if we're covering technology from the central structure, we didn't take away discretionary when that happened. That's part of why there is the amount of discretionary that there is at the building level, because they're not just out buying random things because they have the money there, because they know that these are items that they help. They might have something in a building. I'm going to use a bathroom, for instance, some new stalls or something in a bathroom that they partner with facilities, or they want some new flooring. What does that look like? And they partner with facilities with the discretionary that they're saving. So we kept the same principle in mind, but that has allowed for some of that to build up, which is what we end up using in times like this. So that's what they've been looking at. That answers your question.
And the other was technology is always ever changing and expensive and breaks. And none of those are cheap and they're hard to budget for. Is it your office that makes the decision to be able to use contingency funds? First, like, if you have contingency funds, can you use it for something like that? Or do we have to say, maybe we should put a little bit more money in there because that's not enough?
That's what revenue.
The board makes the ultimate decision about what transfers are made from the general fund, from their excess ending fund balance. The contingency funds need to be, they can be used by resolution up to 15% once it's been budgeted. So if there was a thought that you wanted to put more into technology from that contingency line of 3.75 million, that would need to be budgeted that way. So now would be the time to change that for next year.
Question. We haven't settled our contract with the teachers. How would that affect this budget?
Yeah, as I said in the presentation, we would need to, any excess above what I've budgeted would need to come from excess ending fund balance. So likely from the transfers would need to be reduced, or we would reduce other expenditures or staffing levels. We would have to adjust something in the budget.
Okay. Thank you.
And that would likely, I don't know when, hopefully we'll settle that contract before the board adopts the budget. But if not, we would need to make those changes after the fact. It doesn't stop us from approving our budget tonight.
Can I just follow up on Jason's first question about building discretionary carryover? That amount can absorb the cut that you're having.
Yes.
Yeah. So anything that the principals were planning, that, although they're going to still have a context of maybe wanting to hold on to some of that money for future use.
Yes, and not all buildings have the same amount of carryover as well, so there's that consideration. But they have been planning because.
I just want to make a comment. just knowing that this year we're gonna be taking $1 million out of reserve. And we're fortunate to get that wildlife grant funds, 1.3 million. I appreciate how Kim and how the board has put money away for times like this. And that's a really smart way to run your district. And there's a lot of districts that aren't in that place where we do have reserve funds. But I want to make sure that that's noted that this is happening this year. You know, you don't want it to be a trend. I just kind of want to just make note of that people need to know that we are dipping into our reserve funds.
And those are one-time funds. That's a good point.
Yeah.
I should have emphasized that because when you use those one-time funds, your hole is bigger the next year.
Yeah.
And we already know we're going to be down. So
It's really, yeah, I mean,
it
really
is
time.
definitely something. to be aware of.
We've kind of been in a comfort level and now we know, and we know looking ahead that we've got to have really sharp pencils.
And we've been there before.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't say it's time to panic by any means. As I've said before, we don't panic, we plan. That's why we have reserves to, you know, get us through some planning for a year, hopefully. But it is a reality that we are going to be down next year, further than this year.
Well, and I heard in the numbers in the demographic study that shows a 10-year decline. And it sounds like, I mean, the budget message is one of the biggest challenges in addition to operational increases. Also, this third giant challenge of federal instability at the moment. And so all those combined, maybe I'm a pessimist today. I try not to be, but it seems longer term than a year that I'm talking about. And so I'm just kind of curious what the board's thinking longer term.
Yeah.
To address those challenges, not just for next year. And I mean, it feeds into
You're exactly right.
of like, we're already dipping in.
Yeah, so let me speak to my recommendation on the use of cash, because it's not something that we like to do. And Kim really doesn't like to do it, understandably. I really believe that, the cuts through attrition and declining enrollment are pretty easy ones to make, because the students weren't there and people retired, and you're not talking about people in programs at that point. You're talking about positions. When you get to the level that we could possibly be in next year, I think it requires a longer conversation and more community input and building input than this was really bad. We're going to make program and people cuts right now. We really have to truly analyze what is our discretionary spending going to in every single department in the county school district. We are very lucky that we have cash reserves that we were able to present to you a proposed budget that uses that cash, that gives us that time to make very, very sound decisions when we go into the following year's budget and get input. We get input on SIA, we have surveys, we collect data. We did that through the facility study that we were doing as well. So it's not that we're presenting this one without any input from people, but when you start to get into programming and people positions, I think that's a different level of conversation that we need to be transparently having and upfront about. And I wanted to be able to have that time. And so to really get that time and not look at things like, are we going to start cutting days? Are there additional administrative positions that we need to cut? Is there starting to be programming at the secondary level? I mean, those are all things that you're hearing, or I'm hearing other districts are having to do right now. And we need to prepare ourselves to really have that level of conversation for long term. So I appreciate that question and comment.
I mean, again, when you have 78% of your budget is employee costs, it's your.
Just to kind of like piggyback on Kelly's thing, and not specific to the budget committee itself, but like just being members of our public. I mean, we all see that a huge part of funding is federal and state. So as a person in public, it's important to think about what our actions are doing to try to promote education funding at the federal and state level long term. So just something for us to all think about.
It's very true. I think to Jessica's point too on that, one of the things that I think can help the Lincoln County School District is what are those stories that people see as an impact? Like I can see an impact of what I see in the classroom or by talking to staff or looking at our departments, but parents see a different impact at home. And so what are those stories? What do they see at home that when we are talking to our legislators, either at the state or the federal level, what are those at-home stories that people are seeing? If we, whoever's listening to the recording, I'm not saying we're cutting athletics, but some places have had to do that before. We've had to do that in Lincoln County before when we've had big cuts. And some communities could step up and they could offset it, and other communities had to charge more for their kids. And so when any of those kinds of things, the arts have been something that we have lost before. When that happens, there's an impact at the building level and in well-rounded education that we see as a provider. It's not good, but there's a different impact that people see at home, and those are also stories to be shared and told. It's a big impact when there's cuts like that.
I have a question on the continuous improvement plan goals. Is there like a trend of what it's been for both of those two items for the high school graduation rate and attendance? We constantly see, attendance needs improved and graduation rate needs improved, but what has it been for the last 5-10 years?
Aaron, do you want to talk
I
about
can talk a
first?
little bit about graduation rate. So actually graduation rate's one of our.
Aaron, I'm gonna have you come
Oh,
up here,
sorry.
so you're closer to the
I
mic.
wasn't here at the beginning, so I.
We did talk about it.
Apologies for being late. We'll talk a little bit about graduation rates. It's actually one of our strong suits in Lincoln County School District. All of our schools have very high graduation rates. We actually have really strong freshman on track rates as well. So typically those, in the last 3 years, those rates for us have been above the state average. So that is one of probably the strongest things that we do in Lincoln County School District. Attendance is a struggle, and I don't know that I'm the best person to talk about attendance. You can come join me. Attendance is one of the areas that's been a goal and a focus for us for a long time, and we have done a lot of things around attendance and attendance campaigns. But I'll let Natalia chime in on that because I think it's her department.
And while she's on her way up to Mary, another thing with that goal remains. It's still a goal, but we are starting to track it differently. So we have a different method, and we can show you that. And with that, we have had schools that get over 90 and the next year might drop below 90, still staying in the 80% range, but we haven't done the sustainable over 90 every year as the goal was written. So the overarching goal, we haven't changed in that category.
So attendance, can you provide numbers? Oh my God, I was looking at some rates because I feel like every time. I think with attendance, so overall our attendance did increase last year by around a little bit over 4%. And then analyzing that even with our community that we serve, it actually was quite a positive increase from a year to year's attendance. So in Oregon, we track the regular attendance rates for students at school 90% or more, which essentially is students can miss up to 18 school days to be still considered all year, right? So it's like an incremental marker. So the more days that you are in enrollment, the more days that you essentially can miss to be in that part of that 90%. But we are still below Oregon's average, and we still have places to grow. What we're really trying to do is really think through the root causes of absenteeism in our community, and that's really where I think some of the positions that we've talked about really are instrumental in our school social workers, in our health service advocates, in our Hispanic family liaisons. All of these positions really try to wrap around students in the community that we serve to see how we can provide, address those barriers to students being able to be in the building, because we know that students will only be able to benefit from the academics if they actually are in the seat that day. But there are places for us to grow, but we have seen some shift movement forward, and we're really trying to shift language against the punitive of like, where were you, which doesn't resonate with our community, especially post-COVID. We really are trying to talk about the importance of instruction, how you need to be in actual school for that instruction, and how we miss you or you miss something when you're not here. So that's really what we've really shifted some of our language and trying to address some of our attendance.
The other thing I'll add is about graduation rates and freshmen on track is just some programs that we have to support that. So we have on track programs. We have them in every high school, and they track every kid, behavior, attendance, grades, and they're looking to see, trying to help them stay on track. We have people that work for that specifically because we know that the data tells us they're on track. As a freshman, they have a much higher rate of graduating on time. So we have those teams in place at every high school. They're very high functioning. And then if you ask our principals right now, they could tell you down to the kid who is, who's on track to graduate, who's in danger of not, who's not going to, and what plan we have, what plan that we're looking at doing. So I don't have that exact data in front of me right this second, but they are tracking it. Even at the beginning of the year, I talked to our principals, and they know in the beginning of the year who they're working on throughout the whole year to help them get through.
And similarly, like with attendance, we're noticing trends, and we really increased our capacity to track attendance and to really, again, delve into the reasons of the absenteeism. And we've also noticed just trends which really are statewide, which are low attendance off the edges or the spectrum, which is really low attendance in kindergarten and low attendance as we get to 11th and 12th, which is consistent with what we see in other school districts. So this year, in working with Sandy Mummy and the elementary principals, we've really talked about how do we increase attendance with kindergartners, because you're building that routine and that habit of coming to school and making that be an important part of the family structure's life. So we've done some work around kindergarten attendance specifically.
I have a question about attendance. Is that, and this is probably a silly question, but is that attendance if they're halftime in school, like maybe they come and they're like halfway, they missed half of the day, or is this also including tardy, or what exactly is attendance?
Well, it is not a silly question, but it is a very complicated answer. But it is not a silly question, but essentially all you have said is true. So different students, depending, like a secondary student, depending on how many classes you are scheduled to take, have different markers where you are able to decide if they are essentially 0 present or fully absent. And then we do attendance is taken by either 0.5 or 1 increments. So we have a lot of different formulas to calculate that, but it can get tricky. But you're right, it is different markers depending, especially in our secondary students. Elementary is pretty simple. We do AM attendance and PM attendance. So a student, if you're there for most of the morning block time, to be really simple, you're present half the day in the morning or in the afternoon.
Another attendance misconception, I think, that we answer a lot of questions about is people will think that we're funded based on that attendance rate, because the attendance rate gets a lot of conversation, but we're funded off of enrollment. And so we want 90% or better attendance. We want all of our kids in school all the time. But when we are calling and we're saying that, or we're posting lots of things about it, it's not because we're getting money because they came to school. We got money when they enrolled to school to educate them. And now we want to use that money to educate them and have them in class.
So if they're not on 10 consecutive days, does that drop them from your enrollment scope?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really tricky because they might be gone 9. When you were in the school, you might remember when that happened. They were gone 9 and then they were back on the 10th, and we don't drop them, which is great because they came back and we want them to stay back, and then they might be back for a few, and then we have that pattern that happens again. So it's what do we do to get them in school and keep them coming every day and supporting them? There might be real reasons why they're not coming, and what can we be providing for them educationally while there's life that's happening to support them and welcome them back when they can get back.
And to relate it back to the budget for the committee, the attendance pieces are primarily funded out of SIA positions and supplies and things. And the attendance, the 9th grade on track programs are funded from our high school success fund. Again, both based on KBW.
So if there was no further discussion on anything else, I'll move to entertain a motion to implement the corrections to the proposed budget submitted on the suggested changes to the proposed budget document submitted by Business Community. So that'll be for one that just came around. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? So I have moved by Liz Martin, seconded by Mitch Parsons, to approve the suggested changes to the proposed budget submitted by Business Director Kim Cusick. Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, those in favor say aye, those opposed say no.
Aye.
The ayes have it. What are we told?
10.
10 to none. So next up, we'll need a motion to approve budget or recess until May 20th.
So I have a motion if you're ready to do that. So we should discuss where you're at with that. People want to go ahead and approve it now, or if you want to move to a second reading.
I would move to go ahead and approve the 2025-2026 budget right now.
I'm ready to move.
So motion to approve the 2025-2026 budget. Lincoln County School District Budget Committee hereby approves, oh, this is for after we do the motion. Correct.
This is the motion.
This is
Go
the
ahead and
motion.
read it.
Got it. The Lincoln County School District Budget Committee hereby approves the budget for the 2025-2026 fiscal year in the aggregate amount of $180,390,495. Further, the Budget Committee moves that the permanent tax rate of $4.9092 per $1,000 of assessed value be assessed in support of the general fund. This permanent tax rate is expected to raise $46,079,020 in Lincoln and Lane County. The Budget Committee hereby approves the general obligation bond debt service funds budget of $21,737,005, with $5,956,970 being assessed against the assessed property values of Lincoln and Lane County. Do we have a second?
Sorry, I didn't write all that out for you.
That's okay. That's okay. First time. So
And moved by the chair and seconded by
Moved
Miranda
by-
Williams.
the chair, seconded by Miranda Williams. Move budget.
Any further discussion?
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Ayes.
Aye.
I believe the ayes have it. Any opposed?
I'm gonna oppose just to be on the record that I would like to see in a budget that more classified personnel would be in the building. I know that's not part of the budget committee, but I would like to show that there are things that I would like to see in the future, the funds redesignated. And I know I'm the minority, so.
No, that's fine.
So the ayes have it at 9 and one opposition, one nay. So 2025-2026 budget passes.
Thank you.
And by the way, I appreciate you being transparent and presenting it in such a clear way. Thank you.
I'd like to also add to any of the budget committee and board. Last year, we talked about how do we get questions answered if people in the public have questions. Mary had brought that up in the last budget meeting. She and I met after that to go over how can we do a better job of that, which I think is going to be really important as we're continuing possibly in these uncertain times. And Mary sent questions in a couple times that we could go over. And anytime that happens, that helps. Like even the questions here today, just writing them down, how can we add some of that into our presentation so that we can just continue to improve and how we're communicating about the budgeting process and the use of funds and recommendations and things like that. So I appreciate that.
The next item on the agenda is suggestions for the budget document or presentation. Do you have any suggestions for me now?
Well, I think we're really fortunate that we have kept the same budget people on board because the training that you did in the past few years, I think, I'm hoping has been helpful for you. So now this year, when you look at the budget, it's like a bunch of new things. So I really appreciate everyone on the budget committee's time and energy and helping serve the district so we can serve kids.
I
Thank
want
you
to
so
say that when I started serving on the board, this was the least thing that I know about. Now do I care to, learn about it? But
But it's okay.
Did you hear that?
It became my favorite, this is my favorite notebook, I take it back with me when I come. And it's just fun to really see how much work you and your team to explain this in a way that I can understand it and enjoy looking at it. So, thank you.
Suggestions for some of the strategic planning, invitations out. I mean, it sounds like it's gonna be public, so that's awesome, that's great. But also just possibly an email out to the budget committee.
Oh, yeah.
Invitation.
Super.
That's great.
So no further discussion or comments. I think
You
we
can run that thing now.
officially adjourn the 2025 budget committee meeting.
Thanks, man. I didn't even.
Oh, it's fine.